Hey everyone, Hoosier Jedi here again with another video for you. Since The Legend of Korra is going to be coming back to TV in a couple of days, this seemed like the perfect time to do a video to talk about some of the ideas that have occurred to me about the show since the first two episodes were broadcast the other week. So let's get right into it. One thing that I did in my last video was talk a lot about the differences between Aang and Korra. Now I want to talk about one rather interesting similarity that they share. And this is that both of them knew that they were the Avatar early. Now remember, this is only mentioned briefly very early on in the series, that people are told about that they are the Avatar at the age of 16. Now remember season 3, we get to see this happen with Avatar Roku. And it's quite a punch in the gut for him. Now Aang, on the other hand, he found out early and he ran away. This is actually, it's not so much finding out that he was the Avatar that made him run away from the Air Temple. It's finding out that he would be separated from Gyatso, essentially the man who was the closest thing he's had to a father. So Aang's reaction to finding out he was the Avatar early was to run away, to reject his destiny. Now Korra, she has the complete opposite reaction to this, of course. And her reaction is, very early stated right there when we first see her, I'm the Avatar, you gotta deal with it. So she's embraced this since the time, being the Avatar since the time she was 5 years old. Now, let's think about this for a second. She's 5 years old and she knows that she's the Avatar. Most kids have not quite mastered going to toilet by themselves by the time they're 5 years old. Korra could already bend 3 elements. So right from her earliest days, basically, the notion that she has been the Avatar has been shaping Korra. And the thing with Aang is, by the time we get back with him, he's like what? He's turned about 13 by the time everything's wrapped up. And again, looking back at some of the early episodes, the first season, a lot of that was him finally having to come to terms with the fact that he was the Avatar. He had to embrace his destiny, or the world was screwed. So this sort of brings the question, is it really, is it a good idea that they do wait until the people who are avatars are 16 before they let them know? Now, the only, boy, I really can't talk. The only example of what we have when this sort of thing goes right is Roku. And all in all, given everything we've seen, this Roku was, in fact, a great Avatar. So this leads me to think that yes, this is a very, very good idea to do this, to wait until they're 16. And, not as a knock against anybody as kids or anything, but kids are just like anybody else. They are vulnerable to arrogance. They're vulnerable to hubris. And while it's certainly still true when they're 16 years old, and believe me, if you've ever been around, if you spend a lot of time around teenagers when you're as an adult, boy, is that obvious. Yeah, I mean, not to specifically diss teenagers, it's just once you stop being a teenager, you view teenagers very differently. Let me just say that and leave it at that. So, how is this going to pan out? Well, again, what I said was that part of Aang early on was him really getting past not wanting to be the Avatar. It was a moot point. He lost Gyatso anyway. Now, and eventually he did flat out just accept, I'm the Avatar. It's on me to stop Fire Lord Sozin. So the question is, what is this going to mean in terms like that for Korra? What is she going to have to accept? Well, first of all, it certainly isn't that she's the Avatar and that she's going to have to deal with things. I mean, right from the top, from being a kid, she's certainly embraced that. My thought on this, based on what we've seen on the show so far, is that while Aang's thing was about embracing destiny, Korra's deal may be, and this just be throwing an idea out there for your consideration, Korra might have to learn to accept limits. And we've seen in the first episode, being the Avatar does not get you out of getting charged with vigilantism and destruction of private property. It doesn't change the rules of a pro bending game for you. And Korra, again, she's in the city where there is a system in place of laws and rules and governance. And she can't just swagger in there and say, I'm the Avatar, here's how it's going to be. That's just not going to work. So I think that is one of the things that we are going to see as a theme for Korra. One thing that someone wrote that I read was a part of growing up is getting to the point in life where you make peace with the system. Now, I don't want to get really too political with this, but I actually think this might be kind of something we're going to see with Korra, because part of the duty of the Avatar is to maintain, is basically to help people. But they have to get people to cooperate with them in order to do this a lot of the time. So I think Korra learning to work within the system or that is already in place in Republic City, or to spur reform of this system, is going to be something that we're going to be seeing as the series goes along. Because, Avatar or not, Korra can't just go in there and just start, tearing down walls, as it were, because, that's not going to do anything good. Basically, what I'm saying here is you can tear down walls in society, politically, socially, economically, whatever. But if you have nothing to offer in place of that, if you have no idea how to rebuild, then all you've really done is make a big mess. Okay, so let's get away from that. Let me address something that one of my commentators, who I'm sorry I've forgotten their name, brought up. Is, do they think that Katara taught Korra bloodbending? And again, it's only been 2 episodes, so I don't think we certainly can't say, but I'm going to go out there on a limb a little bit and say no, she didn't. Because if we look back at the episode where this happened, after it happened, Katara was not terribly happy that she had learned this power. She'd learned something dark. Now, notice I said dark, not evil. Now, there are probably many, many circumstances in which, if you were forced to, you could use bloodbending to do something good. But as we saw with Hama, and even with Katara, when she found the guy who basically killed her mother, mostly bloodbending exists to hurt people. And while in the Avatar world it's made clear that sometimes violence is a necessary solution to problems, bloodbending is something that dances perilously close to the edge. And, while she does seem to be a good person at heart, Korra is someone who I think, and as I've said, she's got a real problem with hubris. And, power and arrogance, vanity, pride, hubris, whatever term you want to use, are a very bad combination. So while Korra does have great power physically and as the Avatar, let's just say elementally, since spiritually is the thing that we know she has to work on, she's not quite there in terms of wisdom. And by wisdom, I mean the knowledge that we all have as we get older of the greater ramifications of our actions, of how the world is tied together. And this is a fundamentally important thing for an Avatar. Their job is to maintain balance in the world. And if you don't understand how everything is connected, how your actions will resonate, then as the Avatar, you could end up doing more harm than good. And again, to kind of go back to what I mentioned, the analogy I used in my previous Avatar Korra discussion video, where I compared Korra to Anakin Skywalker. Well, if you give someone who has personality, they have great talent, they have great power, they're young, they're dynamic, and all this, and you give them this level of power, it may not end well. There is that tendency to go off and assume that, you know, because I am so good at what I do, that my judgment is also that as good as my skill. And, sadly, judgment and skill are not always connected. I mean, let's take a look at think about, for example, and this is maybe not the best example. Think of all the athletes out there who make just gobs and gobs, millions and millions of dollars, and then think about how many of those guys a few years later you hear, for whatever reason, are barely scraping by. I mean, I read that's basically the situation with Dennis Rodman right now. So again, power, wealth, all of this, does not translate. Skill does not translate into wisdom, is basically the point I'm trying to make here. And yeah, I really don't think Katara would have given that power to Korra, simply because Korra is not ready to have such power. Korra already has a phenomenal amount of power at her fingertips. And as we've seen in the first 2 episodes, she's certainly not above making very bad, very teenage, adolescent mistakes. So yeah, it's probably a good thing that Katara has not passed that on to her. And frankly, it really wouldn't surprise me if Katara has not passed that skill along to anyone and has decided that it's better that this knowledge die with me. So anyway, that's an idea. I'm just throwing that out there for you. Okay, I have several other things I want to talk to you, but I don't think I'm going to have. I've only got not even 3 minutes left. So I'm not going to get into those. I'll save that for another video I'll do in a day or two. I do have enough time to sort of throw out a few little things that have occurred to me. And these are questions that I'm going to be asking myself as I watch the series go along this season. I've got them written down over here, so I'm just going to read them off. I'm sure we'll get the answer to this first one right away. Very soon is, who's Fire Lord now? Most likely some descendant of Zuko, and almost certainly May. I mean, they were so hinting at that at the very end of the show. Hey, who's running the Earth Kingdom now? I wouldn't mind knowing that. Hey, here's one that I've been wondering about. Where are Guru Patik's people? You remember him? We only ever saw one guy who looked like him, but presumably there are more of those folks out there somewhere in the Avatar world. Now, my personal theory is that they're probably members of the Earth Kingdom, but who knows? I kind of hope that's something the show goes back to, because I think it would add an interesting element to the world. And seeing as how we're in a new show and the world has dramatically changed, bringing in some people who maybe we haven't seen before or much of, and kind of getting an idea of what's going on with their culture could potentially be really interesting. Okay, there's remember the episode The Fortune Teller and Aunt Wu's prophecies about Katara? Well, so far I'd say it's on the right track to being true. And if I remember right, it says Katara wasn't going to die until she'd had at least one great grandkid running around. So, given how young her grandchildren are, I guess we're going to be seeing Katara's got quite a bit of time left. And I'm also hoping that we'll get to see Korra showing off some of Katara's moves. I actually really hope we get to see Korra doing her Katara's old ice surfing trick. I was always massively entertained by that whenever from that episode. Anyway, I'm almost out of time, folks. So, as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And if you're in the mood, you can even follow me on Twitter as Hoosier Jedi. It's news, so there's not a whole lot right there. But as I pick up people, I'm going to, of course, keep Twittering more and more often. I've only had it for that account for a little while. Okay, I am almost out of time. I will see you guys later. Have a good one.